protein is an important part of your diet, and they are made up of long chains of amino acids and found in lots of foods, but typically are associated with meats. So what are amino acids? Amino acids, like their name implies, have an amine group. Remember, an amine is a nitrogen attached to two hydrogen that's connected to a carbon. We also have an acid portion, which is our carboxylic acid. So we've got a carbonyl, carbon double bonded to oxygen, also attached to an OH group. And then we have something that we refer to as an R group. And an R group is just a group that contains either hydrogen or carbon. And so this R group, when our R group changes, that changes the amino acid. So all amino acids have the top portion, the amine and the carboxylic acid. If we change that R group, that changes the type of amino acid that it is. So there are 20 different amino acids, and we can classify them into nonpolar, polar, acidic, and basic. But if you notice, they all have different R groups, so all different chains that come off of that carbon between the amine and the carboxylic acid. So the red portion of each of these is the part that changes. And so if you want to find and determine which amino acid it is, we have to compare the side chain, or the group that our R group, in order to determine the type of amino acid. So some are fairly simple, like alanine. Alanine has a CH3 group. And some are more complex, like tryptophan. So tryptophan has a ring structure that comes off of it as the R group. But we are always looking at that side chain, that R group that comes off of the main backbone. So in order to identify them, we're looking at that portion. There are things called essential amino acids, and what makes them essential is that our body, so human bodies, cannot produce these particular amino acids. What that means is that we have to ingest them in our diet in order to remain healthy, because we do need these in our own bodies to build up the proteins that make up muscle and cells in our body. So how do we end up getting these essential amino acids? Well, we need to have a way of getting complete proteins. Now, if you eat meat, this is not a problem because all meats are complete proteins. So the proteins that make up muscle fibers contain all 20 of our amino acids. However, if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, you do have to be more careful about the food choices that you eat in order to make sure that you are getting complete proteins. So a way to get these is if you're eating whole grain rice, lentils, or you could choose whole grains with nuts. That would also get you a complete protein. And so you'll notice many dishes that become popular in society contain combinations of these ingredients. You could have whole grains and beans, or you could have beans and nuts. You could do hummus and whole grains. So by combining these different food groups, you end up with complete combination, or those complete proteins that are required by your body. Let's look at our amino acids a little bit closer and how we put them together in order to make a protein. So remember, we have our amine and our carboxylic acid backbone and the R group that changes. To combine the amino acids to make a protein, we need to bond them together. And we are going to look at short chains of amino acids, and short chains of amino acids are what we call a peptide. If we bond them together, it becomes a peptide bond. It forms between the amine and our carboxylic acid. When these two come together, we can form a chain that is held together by the peptide bonds. That bond happens between the carbon and the nitrogen. The function of our proteins are determined by the order that the amino acids are strung together in. And so this is an important thing that research focuses on in order to determine the order of these amino acids. So we do, in this case, where we have 3 amino acids attached together, we form 2 peptide bonds. When that bond forms, we get rid of water in the process to form our peptide bond between the carbon and the nitrogen. In this particular example, we look at the side chain. So a CH3 side chain is an alanine. We have a CH2 with an SH, that is a cysteine. And our branched R group here would match up with leucine. So you would look at your amino acid table and match these side groups to determine the amino acid. Here's a practice for you. See if you can locate the peptide bonds and also name the amino acids present. Pause the video while you're determining your answer. To find our peptide bonds, we are looking between the carbon and the nitrogen. In this case, we have 2 peptide bonds. To identify the amino acids, we are going to compare them to our amino acid table. So our first example here, we have a ring structure, and there's only a few that we can choose from that have rings, but it's a ring with an OH group. So in this case, our first one would be tyrosine. We look at our middle amino acid, we have a CH2 with an OH. And if we look at our list of possibilities, we see that it is serine. Our last example, we have a branched carbon group. And so this is, and that branch comes off the second carbon. So this is leucine.